Welcome to Ask Seán, where I explore all sorts of questions about life, relationships, and being human. I'm Seán Slevin, a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And if you have a question for me, you can send that to me anonymously at asksean.org. So in this video, I want to talk about longings, and particularly about what do we do with our unfulfilled longings, and even the tiny unfulfilled longings, right? Just the daily disappointments. What do we do with our disappointment? What do we do with our unfulfilled longings? What is sort of the kind of answer, or hesitate to use the word solution, to our pain here in these places? So I'm going to give sort of the ending at the beginning, and then we're going to kind of unpack, well, are there alternatives? Because none of us really like the answer I'm about to give. I think that the answer for what do we do with our unfulfilled longings, what do we do with our just even, daily, little itty bitty disappointments? I think the answer is grief. We grieve. We be with the sadness. We be with the sorrow. Now, you might be about to tune out and be like, well, hell with that. I'm not interested in that, which is very understandable, right? Grief is hard. Sadness hurts. So, but let's explore, just kind of for the sake of devil's advocate, let's explore some of the alternatives. And then I'm going to circle back to kind of going deeper into why do I think grief is the answer? And what do I think does it have to offer us? Why do I think it actually is the way to lasting peace and joy? So, in our culture, we are very good at avoidance. I mean, that's kind of American culture. We supposedly it's about the pursuit of happiness, but really it's about the pursuit of avoidance. It's about trying to not feel anything uncomfortable, which is very different than actual genuine happiness. Genuine happiness, I would argue, is predicated on having a capacity to feel the uncomfortable things. So we are not a country that is pursuing happiness. We are a country that pursues avoidance. We pursue avoidance through distraction. So, okay, that's one possible route, right? I have an unfulfilled longing. I have a small disappointment, a huge disappointment, whatever it may be. I can just try to distract myself, get busy with something, maybe distract myself through video games or through shopping or exercising or socializing or whatever. But I think we all know that at the end of the day, the literal end of the day, when things get quiet and we're starting to try to go to sleep, the pain of that unfulfilled longing or even that small disappointment, it's still there. It hasn't actually gone away. And we experience this with really probably whatever other examples I'm going to come up with here as far as alternatives to grief, is at the end of the day, our pain is there waiting for us. It's waiting to be addressed. So, but we'll take a stab at this. Let's see if we can find a few more. So another common one is we get angry. This is a real favorite of our culture on both sides of the political spectrum. We get angry about our unfulfilled longings. We get angry about our disappointments. We get demanding. We get coercive. We also can get coercive internally. So that's really where you go to sort of the suppression route. I'm going to try to convince myself that I don't want this anymore. Or if it's a relationship, that I don't care about this person, or I don't love them, or I don't want, connection with them. And we try to talk ourselves into that, right? But we're really just doing violence to ourselves. So the anger route is either doing violence to oneself or doing violence to others. So it's violence to others is more this route of I'm trying to sidestep my grief by demanding that you behave in such a way that I'm not disappointed, right? You can see how that is quickly going to become abusive. That's, again, coercive. It's It's asking someone else to bear the burden of our pain, which they can't do for us, right? Only we can bear that. Now, people can be with us in our pain, and I'll talk more about that. But no one can do our grieving for us. So let's see. So we've described avoidance. We've mentioned avoidance. We've mentioned anger. Certainly there's other ways of avoiding. You can get into various addictions, compulsive behaviors, substance abuse. You can, use sex, sexual activity. You can use other humans, whether through sex or through just even socially, right? Like maybe you've had experiences of a friend, acquaintance who kind of sucks the life out of you. Maybe sometimes you've been that person, I've been that person at points in my life where I was not taking responsibility for my own needfulness and not seeking actually effective help, right? But wanting to either subtly or coercively, you're supposed to take care of this, kind of thing. So we can all become sort of the demanding, screaming child, kind of thing, and that's part of what happens if we ignore our grief. So I'm trying to think if there's any other examples of alternatives to grieving, and we've talked about trying to convince ourselves that we don't actually have the longing anymore. We don't want that thing or that experience or that event or that person. I don't know. That's probably enough for now. I think you get the idea. So I'm talking about this not from an academic place. Look, I don't I don't like pain. I'm human like everyone else. There are things in my life that I have not wanted to let go of, that I've wanted to I've not wanted to face, that they were not going to happen, or that they weren't true, or that something bad was going to happen, right? And so there's an element of we don't let go of our fantasies sometimes, it's they have to be pried out of our fingers kind of thing. But I have consistently found that grief is the only path. This is the only path I have found that actually works, that actually, in the long run, brings me to a better place, even as my longings are unfulfilled. Now that sounds like crazy talk, right? like how can this be? And I think this feels so inconceivable to us, again, because of the culture that we've all been born into here in the West. This is a culture that has lost its stomach for anything hard. It's lost its stomach for sorrow, for grief. We see this even now we do funerals, right? We sanitize the heck out of it. It used to be that funerals happened in the home of the family, in whom the person died. The body would be in the living room. That was a time when we faced death a lot more head on. Now, I'm not saying that all things about the past are better, because they're not. But we have sought to sanitize and insulate, and we want to pretend that death isn't real. We want to pretend that loss isn't real. And yet our gut knows, our bodies know. We can't go through a single day without disappointment. And I think we all know deep down that it doesn't work to try to just not want anything, because we are made to want. We all have wants. Wants are part of what make us who we are, right? They're part of the particulars of each of us, that one of us wants to go to this concert and another of us wants to go to that concert, right? And one of us, wants to go to this concert this badly, and the other of us wants to go this badly, right? It's all these variations and all these distinctions, and it's the combination and the kaleidoscope of all of these wants and all of these longings that make up a person. So here's the thing: if you get rid of your wants and your longings, there's not much of you left, maybe nothing left. I mean, I'd have to think more like philosophically, psychologically, like is there still some element of a person if you somehow can get rid of all their wants, all their longings? That's an interesting. Yeah. So I won't say definitively, right? But it seems it seems you're not going to have much left, or maybe there's nothing left of you at that point. And here's the thing. I mean, I've talked about this in other videos, I think, about the necessity of taking risks, that living well involves risk taking. Because if we get to the end of our life and it's like, I didn't take any risks, then also what we're saying is I didn't live my life. Like I never stepped out. I never expanded. I never reached for anything, right? Like that's a tragic life. I mean, it barely qualifies as the word life. Like that's barely existing. Like we're meant for so much more than that. And so then this takes us into this conundrum, right? Like if we actually engage that we have longings, then well, shit, like stuff is not always going to work out. Like it doesn't matter how many resources you have. I don't care if you're rich or poor. Like there are always going to be things that you long for that aren't happening and that aren't possible. And I would argue, in my view, as a Christian, my view spiritually, and you don't have to be a Christian to potentially resonate with this, but I would argue that our longings are meant for beyond this life. They're for this life, but they're not just for this life, right? Like this. So this is part of the thing, and sort of other wiser, more articulate people than I have talked about sort of this hypothesis that if my longings consistently exceed the world that I'm in, then perhaps I was ultimately made for a different world. Not that I'm in the wrong place, but like this is sort of taking a view of reality that this is the beginning, right? That this life is the beginning, not the ending. Now you may not have that view. Maybe you're coming from sort of a more materialistic view, or kind of a view that like this is it, and once we're dead, there's nothing more. I find that really depressing in some ways, although I've heard arguments, from that standpoint, trying to say, well, that's makes this life all that more precious. And I think there's something to be said for that too, right? I would agree that this life is precious. I think this life matters immensely. And I just, my observation. So whatever, we're going to have all sorts of, and this is going out to the internet. We're going to have all sorts of beliefs and perspectives on, what happens after death. So I don't want us to get hung up on that. But it's my observation that, at least for myself, maybe I'm alone in this. I don't think so, because I hear it in my clients, I hear it in my friends, I hear it in family members. But I think that we all long for a lot more than what our lives have. And so, and then we probably have different perspectives on that. Like, so, there's what I would call a bit of a fantasy of like, well, in theory, somehow I could have it all, right? I just haven't, gotten this, that, or the other. If I won the lottery, if I had more money, if I had more resources, if I was born in different circumstances, then I would have it all. And this is an appealing fantasy. So this is another sort of a way of, trying to avoid the pain, right? Avoid the grief. And part of what's appealing about it is it doesn't require much of us, right? Like we sidestep the grief temporarily. It also doesn't like call us into accountability for, what choices are we making in our life? Do we participate in our longings or not? I don't think it's true. I could be wrong, right? But I mean, I've tested that out. I've wanted it to be true. I've fucking wanted it to be true. Because it lures, it holds this carrot out there. Well, if I could just get everything right, then it would all fall together and I would have my perfect life. And I've just never found that to work. I just haven't found it to work. And it's frankly with a lot of sorrow that I have let go of that. I did not let go of that easily. Oh gosh, I did not. So then what the flippin' hell are we to do, right? It's like, okay, Seán, you're talking about this grief thing, so you the viewer have managed to still be watching after I've given you so much bad news. This is probably not the way to make YouTube videos, right? Like, let me tell you all the things you don't want to hear up front. It'll make it really hard for you to want to hang in here and keep listening. So what do we do? What do we do? How do we grieve this well? So several things. So first off, we have to stay with the longing. Don't squelch the longing. Don't suppress it. Don't minimize it. Don't try to talk yourself out of it. And then at the same time, don't abandon your grief. Stay with the sadness, with the sorrow, or if it's a tiny grief, the little itty bitty disappointment, right? Of the getting caught by the train, or, you know, the store not having your favorite whatever. Now, to do this well, we need connection. We need to have people in our life whom we can be sad with, and they are not afraid of our sadness, which means they have done this kind of work. So this may be a counselor, although I'm frankly, as I'm kind of learning things about how my field is evolving, like, you can't assume that a counselor will have this capacity. They should, in theory, but I'm finding and hearing kind of rumblings of there's more and more counselors that are really kind of steeped in our culture, and so they're really more oriented around how do we just make you feel better, which isn't going to help you in the long run. We don't need someone to make us feel better. We need someone who can help us bear the life we have, because that's where we're going to actually find joy and peace, is grappling with, this is the life I've got. I don't get to live somebody else's life. Nobody gets to live mine. I have to live mine. So the good and the bad, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the beautiful of the life I've got. So, but yeah, so this might be a counselor if they have done this kind of work on themselves, right? In terms of, and so they're not afraid of your sadness. They're not afraid of those as edges of despair. They're not afraid of your weeping, your wailing, your moaning. So I don't care if it's a counselor or not. You've got to find an individual like this somehow. Someone who has this capacity, who's doing this kind of work in their own life. And so then you practice with them. You practice by starting to tell them, this is my longing. I really want this, fill in the blank. I long for this vocational change. I long for this change in where I'm living, this change in family situation, this change in relationship status. I long for a child, perhaps. I long to see my career take off. I long to not, feel afraid of X, Y, Z. I mean, longings can be about so many things, but you name it, you say it out loud, and then you, as best you can, you try to let the emotion come. So you say out loud, I long for this, and then you also say out loud to this person, and it's not happening right now. Or depending on what it is, it might be something where it's like, it's never going to happen. Like if it's like, I long to talk to my deceased family member again, and they're dead. I can't talk to them in the flesh again. And even if I have a view of the afterlife where I believe I'll see them again, they're not here now. And I want them here now, and I need them here now. And they're not here. And to let yourself be with another human and be with how much that aches, how much it hurts. Let your throat start to constrict, let your eyes start to tear up, and let the emotion come. And it is scary. We're so afraid of this pain. We're so afraid of it. And this is part of why we're afraid of our longings. We are a people, ironically, as a culture that seems to want so much, we actually want very little. Like we are consumed with all of this meaningless shit. but we don't allow ourselves to really want what matters to us. We don't allow ourselves the dignity of our longings because we're scared. We're so afraid. We're so afraid of how much it hurts to say out loud, I want this and I want this so badly, and I don't know if it'll ever happen, and I don't have control over it. We're so afraid of that. And yet, can you feel how even, and I'm not even naming a specific thing, though I'm tapping into internally, very real things in my life that I want, maybe more than I've wanted anything, and that may never happen. Some of the things I think about won't happen. I know they won't happen. They're a 99% certainty. And other things are like, well, they might, but they very well may not. Like the future possibilities on some of these things are very uncertain for me. And so I'm staying with the ache. I'm staying with the sorrow, and I let myself weep when I need to weep. And for me as a Christian, I bring this to God, not in some like silly, like Jesus fix my problems, but just like, God, this fucking hurts. Help me bear this. Help me bear this. This pain that feels unbearable. This pain that feels like it will undo me. And it kind of does undo us. But can you feel the hints of how there is a different kind of strength in being able to say out loud, I want that thing. I'm going to admit it. I'm going to be brave enough to say what I want. And brave enough to feel the sadness and the sorrow of not having it and of maybe never having it. Like there's an honesty, there's an integrity there. There's a clarity. And this is part of the gift of this. So I hinted at this earlier, right? Of like, if we strip away all of our wants, all of our longings, is there anything left to us? So there's something about the clarity of like being able to say, I really want that. That helps give me direction. And this is part of the gift of longings. This is part of the power of longings if we can be brave enough to receive it, brave enough to walk with our longings, to not abandon them, to not squelch them, to not lock them away, to not pretend they don't exist, is that they become a compass. They become a compass heading. They become a spotlight shining the way. Now here's the thing, and here's the difficult part of this path is that, when we're starting out on this, like the immature parts of us are like, okay, yay, so I'm getting clarity, so I'm gonna go after this, and then I'm gonna get the thing. And it doesn't work that way. I mean, here I am giving you more bad news. We may get some of the thing, right? So I'm not saying we don't get some things, because we do. We actually, so here's the thing, if you can stay with me for the whole video, right? Like I want to talk about actually how this path, even though it involves being honest about so much loss and so much that we don't get, this path also opens us up to good that we didn't even know existed. Good we didn't even have the ability, we weren't even brave enough to let ourselves dare to hope for. And so it's paradoxical, because simultaneously, there is stuff that really matters to me that I'm never going to get in this life. And some things that I may get some of, but even there, it's not going to be perfect. It just isn't. Like, there's no way it's going to be perfect. Because nothing is perfect in this life, if we're honest. I forgot my train of thought. Oh, gosh. Where was I going? I was trying to say... Oh my goodness, I totally lost my place. Be gracious with me. I have zero outline. This is all just out of my head. I was going somewhere though with that train of thought. I was progressing towards a point. I was giving a caveat that we do get some of what we long for. We get bits of it. And this process actually enables us to enjoy those more. They become sweeter. Like, here's the thing. We tend to think, oh, if you just don't expect too much of life, which actually in some ways that I might sort of agree with, but it depends on how we mean that. We tend to use expect sometimes as synonymous with want. Well, if you just don't want too much of life, if you don't long for too much, then you won't be disappointed. The goal of life is not to be undisappointed. The goal of life is not to avoid disappointment. That will, and you will, if you orient your life around avoiding disappointment, you will not live your life. You will not have a life. Like, your life will get really, 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 really small. And you'll feel small, and you'll feel angry, and you'll feel afraid, and you'll feel ashamed. The goal of life is to want, in a true way, in an honest way, kind of, in a sense, to want for everything. So not in the silly, greedy, shallow way of our culture of like, I want a Porsche, and I want a pony, and I want da-da-da-da. Like, but no, I mean longings, to tap into the deep, deep roots of your heart. And so if a Porsche actually taps into that, then great. Long for that, right? Like, a Porsche can be a marvelous thing. Driving a really well-engineered car, oh, that can be such a joy, right? Driving a Porsche as a way of avoiding your pain is really fucking empty. Like, that's actually avoiding your longings, ironically. So you can have, this is where wealth doesn't solve this, right? People can be wealthy and not have addressed a single longing. That's the irony, right? This isn't ultimately a resource problem. Resources, they're a useful tool, but if you haven't done the emotional work to know what you even really truly want, then you're just going to use the resources to keep avoiding your pain, and you'll self-abandon until you die, and you'll have never lived your life. And frankly, a lot of rich people do that. Like, it's really tragic. I know it's hard to feel sorry maybe for someone with so much resources, but like, yeah, many of them are quite miserable. Like, wealth does not solve this. So, but if we can be brave enough to keep turning towards our longings and turning towards our grief, we get clarity on who we are and what we're about. So there are things in my life that I'm never going to have, that are never going to be totally fulfilled. But because I let them stay alive in me, I bear the sorrow of longing for what I don't have. And it guides me, it helps instruct me on how I spend my time and how I spend the limited resources that I have. And that does lead to joy. And that does lead to a kind of contentment. Not a contentment that diminishes my longing, but a contentment with what is. So here's kind of, we love formulas. This might be as close as I ever get to describing a formula. It's not a formula. It's describing a cycle, but it's not a formula that, like, check off the box and da-da-da-da. Like, it's describing how it can play out if we are faithful with it, if we stick with it. So the first piece is you got to stay with your longings. The second piece is you've got to not abandon your grief. You've got to stay with your grief. Doing those two things expands our capacity to accept our life as it is. This doesn't mean, so just to be clear, this doesn't mean I'm saying that bad things are good, right? Like, if I am, like, if I'm sleep deprived, which Seán at times am because of various reasons, I'm not calling that good. I'm not like putting a shiny bow on it, like, well, I'm just accepting it and it's fine. Like, no, it sucks. Like, it's hard. It's hard being tired. It's hard not being able to get good sleep sometimes. And it's frustrating, and ultimately it's saddening. And if I can grieve that sufficiently, repeatedly, I let go of my angst about it. And so I'm not pretending that it's a great thing. It's like, no, it's really, it's difficult. It's difficult at times. But being able to, like, not fight it, like fight it in the sense of, Like there are things in life we can do something about. We have some influence over. In which case, do the thing. You know, if you can shift something, great. But that's limited. Like again, no matter how many resources you have, no matter whatever, like you're always gonna at some point bump up against this limit where it's like it doesn't matter what I do here. I've done what I can do, and so the rest of the outcome is out of my hands. And that's the part that I want to be able to like make some peace with and say, I don't like it, but it's what is. Because my like banging against that wall like a toddler, like isn't getting me anywhere. I'm just wasting energy and like just, bruising my hands and arms, right? Like it doesn't do any good. And like just rolling over in despair doesn't do any good. Like I want to be able to say, I want to feel that wall, get clarity on what, like, okay, yeah, that's the part that's not movable. What I can move, I'm going to move, but that's the part that's not movable. Got my hand on that wall, and I want to feel everything I need to feel about that, and then I want to just be able to like walk right along that edge. Like I want to be able to, in a sense, move forward. I mean, we could say move on, and that would be fine too. Sometimes that we tend to use that as a moving away from our emotion, and that's not what I mean here. Like my emotion will come up still, right? I'm still going to be disappointed repeatedly. I'm still going to be sad. I'm still going to be sorrowful at times. So as that happens, I need to be able to feel those emotions, right? But I want to be able, the more that I can accept my life as it is, this is what is. I don't like it, but this is what is. That acceptance piece actually opens me up to start to be able to see and notice the good of what is as well. Not necessarily the good of the same thing, right? Like it might be about something different. It might be other parts of my life, right? So this isn't about finding the silver lining or whatever. Sometimes there isn't a silver lining. Sometimes things just suck. Sometimes they're just ugly and brutal. And if I can grieve sufficiently in that moment and moments again and again, if I can allow people to be with me, if I can feel the contact of fellow humans who aren't afraid of my sorrow, and so build up my capacity to be with my sorrow, I will start to be able to see beauty and colors and nourishment and joy and goodness in the world that has always been here, but I couldn't notice. And again, I'm not speaking from an academic place here. Like I didn't learn this in a book. And I should add, I'm not saying this is even the best articulation, right? This is my articulation at this point in time. Maybe I'll have a better articulation in a year. At the very least, I will have practiced this another year. But I am finding again and again in my places of deep sorrow, as I move to be with this is what is, even though it's not what I want, not how I want it to be. This is what is. This is what is. This is what is. It expands my heart. Sometimes it feels like it's exploding my heart into a larger size. Not exploding my heart into pieces, which is what we feel like is happening, but exploding my heart into a larger size. And that larger heart has more room in it. It has more room in it for beauty. It has more room in it for surprises, for good, lovely surprises. Even just simple little things of the delight of a child's smile or laughter. Or seeing how the sunlight happens to just catch the cobwebs in the corner and in a pretty way. Like I can't begin to even put into words all of the ways in which this has impacted me. What I can say is that it's been shocking. Like I have been genuinely surprised again and again because I didn't know the world was this beautiful. And I'm not disconnected from the hard. I mean, I have cried really, really hard in the past week, the past 7 days. I've wept about some things that I want so, so badly, and that may never happen. In some cases are very unlikely to happen. And it's been heartbreaking. It's been really, really hard. And it's been really good. there's been these beautiful realizations that I've been able to be open to, things that I'm learning about myself, things that I'm learning about life. Like, it's been astounding. It has felt holy in a way. It's felt revelatory. And so again, here's the complexity, right? It's been genuine joy and genuine sorrow. It has hurt like hell. And some of it still really hurts, quite frankly. Like, I'm still metabolizing it. I'm still being with it. Like, I've had tears today about it. I'm still working through it. I'm still accepting it. I'm still making space for this is what is. And God, I don't want it to be this way. I so want for this, and this is what is. And this is apparently how it's going to be. So you can feel here how this is way more difficult and more complex than just like, well, change the things you can, and accept the things you can't, and it. One of my clients likes to say that I'm gonna serenity now this shit, and I'm like, hold up, let's talk that through. Like, that feels a bit like trying to force something. Yeah, we have to fight hard for this. But I hope if you have hung in here with me in this video, I hope that you can feel my energy, feel the ways in which, like, even as I don't have answers for my life, right, about certain things, like there's things I can't change, things I don't have control over, and things that I am continuing to work for and work towards and doing what I can. I'm continuing to let those longings guide me, even as I'm facing the very real prospect that some of them definitely won't be fulfilled. Others of them might be fulfilled partly, but not perfectly. But I hope you can feel the ways in which, like, this, there's an energy that this gives, right? Like, it's vitalizing. This is life force energy that this unlocks, right? Like, I think for those of us that are Christians, we might say this enables us to be more in tune with God, more in sync with God, more in tune with the Holy Spirit. Because look, and just hang with me here, even if you're not a Christian, but I think this is a big part of what makes God God, that God can infinitely long for things for humanity. And given that we're all here, that God hasn't been like, fuck this experiment, I'm rebooting this thing, right? Like, given that we're all still here, that God must have an immense capacity for sorrow. I mean, this is part of what just as a quick aside, part of what I think is so compelling about Christianity when it's understood rightly in its history and not in kind of modern American evangelical bullshit. I'm gonna upset all of you, but anyways, but when rightly understood, Christianity is about the God who weeps, about the God who is sorrowful for his creation. He's sorrowful for his children. Jesus who goes to the tomb of his dead friend. And whether you believe in this miracle or not, the fact that the story plays out this way, so even if you don't believe this miracle, but the story is written such that Jesus knows he's going to resurrect his friend, going to bring his friend back from the dead, and he still weeps and wails at the death of his friend. He doesn't skip over the grief, right? Like, surely if anyone could skip over the grief, it's God, who's like, well, it's going to be okay because I'm going to bring him back from the dead. It's like, no, he stays with that. And that's not a show. That's not a like, oh, let me let you all know that I care. Like, no, I think his heart was exploded into and enlarged. Like, I think he was feeling that gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching, my friend is dead. And I hate that my friend died, and I hate that death is a thing, and I hate that suffering and disease and illness and all the ways that we're cruel to each other and to ourselves, and like that he's weeping over that. This is the God who weeps. I forget now where I was before I went on that excursus. Where was I? I was making a point about something. I can't remember. Oh well. So my invitation to you is don't minimize your longings. Don't hide from your grief by turning your longings into demands. Don't get coercive with your longings. Don't get coercive with yourself. Don't do violence to yourself or others. Stay with your grief. Find somebody who can help you do that. Find somebody who is unafraid of sorrow. There are some of us in the world, maybe not a ton. Find somebody who's unafraid of sorrow and say out loud to them, I want fill in the blank. I want it so badly, and it may not happen. Or even if it does, it's going to be imperfect. And let the emotion come. Let the emotion come. The grief, the anger, there can be anger there as long as you're staying with the grief though, right? Like don't get caught up in the anger and an avoidance, right? But anger can be a part of grief, and that's fine. Just be sure you keep coming back to the sorrow piece so you don't just hang out. And if you hang out in the anger without the sorrow to purify it, it'll become bitterness and resentment, and it'll poison you. And that's, you don't want to do that. Not fun. So feel all the emotions, all the ache. Feel them in relationship. And seek to turn towards your life as it is. Being honest about, this is the life that I have right now. This is my life as it is. And then just keep your eyes and ears open. You don't, so this is where it's not a formula, like, because the good that it'll be a surprise. It's not like, okay, well, I did these things. Now where's the good? That's the little kid in us. Like, okay, I did the things. Where's my cookie? Like, doesn't work that way. It's not how real life works. But just let just keep an eye and an ear open for little surprises, little bits of goodness as you continue this cycle, right? Because here's the thing, to kind of finish describing the cycle. So as our heart opens to the good, that feeds back into and it further amplifies the longing. And so the longing grows because we're like, the world is actually more beautiful than I knew. This makes me want for even more. Fuck. I have even more to grieve. I have more to be with, more sorrow to be with, more to make peace with in terms of what is. And as we make peace with what is and accept what is, that opens us up to more of the good, and it feeds back in. And so you just keep repeating this forever. Easy peasy. No, it is hard. It can sound daunting, and it is daunting. But I think this is the way to the good life, to the degree to which, human life can be good and joyful and fulfilling, and there can be peace and contentment, is yielding to this process, becoming a master of this process. Like, instead of fighting it, instead of resisting it, instead of developing all sorts of unhealthy ways to try to, I want to do anything but that, right? Which it never works. Like, I promise you, it doesn't really work. You're just kicking the can down the road. You're just making the work harder later. You're just pissing off your future self, who's going to be like, why did I do this to myself? So yeah, I hope that you can find somebody who can walk with you in this. So longings, grieving, accepting life as it is, and opening yourself to the good that you didn't know was there. This is the task of the human life. And if you can be faithful to that path, you will do well. Not without pain. You're going to have a shit ton of pain. But look, you're going to have that pain either way. This way, you actually build the capacity to be with it. That's part of the payoff, right? Like, there is no path in life that's going to be free of pain. That's a fantasy. That's a lie. You know, we like to see movies about that, but that's not how life works. Nobody has that life. No one. Like, I promise you, nobody has that life. Everyone has junk. Everyone has pain. Whether they're in touch with it or not, now that's a different story. Now, some people will go to their grave never having lived their life, never having known their own heart. And that can seem maybe preferable to being with the pain, but it's really empty. It's really hollow. So find courage, be brave. It just takes a tiny little bit to start. You know, it's not that I don't get afraid of this stuff still, because it still hurts. Like, it still aches. It still want it to be different. It's hard for me to sit with, like, yeah, I don't have answers. Like, it's not gonna, I don't know about some of these things, if they're ever gonna come to pass or not. And some things I know they won't. Like, they're definitively not going to. But I stay with those emotions too, and I just keep aiming in this direction. I just keep stumbling forward. So won't you join me in this? Won't you stumble forward in your life towards your longings, towards your grief, towards acceptance, towards receiving the good? Well, until next time, peace be with you.